Thank you very much, Mr. President. And wasn't that an experience listening to Mr. Mellom there? Had some interesting words, did Mr. Mellom. I'd love to know what his definition of reasonable is. When he said that what the government had done to taxi operators was reasonable. What they had offered taxi operators was reasonable. He then went on to tell us that there were in fact losers and losers. There were no winners. There were no winners in this. There were losers and losers. And that's the truth. That is the truth. And Mr. Mellom puts his tail between his legs and heads out the door. And I'm not surprised after that performance. He tells us there are losers and losers, and that's the absolute truth. Nobody won here. Nobody won here. It was a disgraceful situation, and I recall having some words with people back when we were in government, back in before 2014, about what was being discussed back then. But I never thought for a moment we would see what this government did to people who have done nothing or had done nothing but work hard, built up a bit of capital, and were preparing for their retirement. I never thought I'd see the day where a government would just get hold of people, throttle them, and leave them for dead. And that's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. It's appalling. And I challenge anyone in this House or anyone outside this House who listened to Mr. Barton today, I challenge them not to be deeply moved by his story. I challenge them. And I challenge anyone in this chamber, or indeed outside this chamber again, not to be outraged by the injustice, yes, that word, injustice, of what happened to Mr. Barton and what happened to so many others who lost everything they had at the whim of a government. If it can happen to Mr. Barton, if it can happen to taxi owners and operators, why can't it happen to every single one of us? Because once the precedent is set, it can be followed. Once a government sets itself up as judge, jury and executioner, and once it successfully does that, there is nothing that will stop it doing it again and again and again. And that's something that really should stay with all of us, But I want to talk for a moment, and I won't do what Mr. Mellom did. I won't go through my full 30 minutes because I don't think that's necessary, and I think Mr. Mellom probably could have, to quote Sir Robert Menzies, I think could have cut his speech in half, and it wouldn't really have mattered which half. But I think that I have seen the pain firsthand. I have seen the agony firsthand of what Mr. Barton has spoken about here today. I have spoken to constituents, many constituents, and I have many constituents in the west of Melbourne, in the northwest in particular, around the airport, but in the west of Melbourne who have lost everything that they own. Many of them, I have to say, who came to this country many years ago from perhaps Greece, perhaps Italy, perhaps even Egypt or somewhere like that. They've come to Australia and they have worked like Trojans ever since they got here. Ever since they got here. All they have done, they have worked 7 days a week. They've not taken holidays. They've not, they might have gone back to the old country for a couple of weeks every few years. But apart from that, all they've done is worked. All they've done is worked and prepared to ensure that they have a retirement that they would be able to enjoy, and look after their families, pay their taxes, all the things as Mr Barton says, they did nothing wrong. They did nothing wrong. Now, if they did nothing wrong, how the hell can they be put in this situation now? How can any government, and I don't care whether it's a Liberal government, Labor government, whatever government, I don't care what government it is, how can anyone do that to people who have just worked hard for a living and have done the right thing all their lives? I have seen the face of bankruptcies. I have seen the face of ruin. I have seen the face, well, not the face directly, but certainly the faces surrounding those who have committed suicide. And that's how serious this is. People are not alive today. People have taken their own lives because they were destroyed by the government. How the hell can that happen in a nation like Australia? How could it happen? But it did. It did. It's quite extraordinary. Quite extraordinary. And when I was chairman, as Mr Melham referred to, when I was chairman of the Economy and Infrastructure Committee, and we did an extensive inquiry into the taxi industry, I remember looking into the gallery, the public gallery of that inquiry, and I think it might have been actually when I first met Mr Barton, if I'm not wrong, and I saw many anguished faces in that public gallery. Men and women who have been screwed over monumentally. You just imagine yourself. You've done very, very nicely. Well, put it this way: you've done all right for yourself. You've worked hard and you've built up an asset. You've built up an asset. You're preparing for your retirement, and you think that you're going to be relatively okay. You're going to be, comfortable, if not over the top, certainly comfortable. All of a sudden, you wake up one day and you're penniless. How do you reckon you'd feel? How do you think you would feel? But that's what happened to these people. That's what happened to these people. They were penniless. They'd lost their assets. They'd lost their homes. They've still got, many of them, hundreds of thousands of dollars owing on loans. They still have to pay their bills. But all of a sudden, they wake up one morning and they have nothing. And I saw those people in the public hearings, in the public gallery of those hearings that we conducted in this building, and I have to commend those people for their restraint, because I tell you what, if it happened to me, I wouldn't be so restrained. I'm not sure what I would do, but I can guarantee I would not be as restrained as those people were. Certainly they were upset. Certainly they were emotional. By God, who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be, having been put through that? But they were restrained and they were dignified. These people are decent, hard-working Australians who do not deserve what has happened to them. They don't deserve that. But it is something that has occurred, and it's something that we should rectify. It's not good enough to say it's happened in the past, there's nothing we can do now. We are members of the Parliament of Victoria. We just don't have the power to do it. We have an obligation. We have a duty to right wrongs. And this is a wrong that must be righted. It must be righted. Yesterday, we saw a budget where the Treasurer got up and he threw billions and billions and billions of dollars in every direction, mainly in marginal seats, but in every direction. Why can't some of that go to compensating these people who have been screwed over by the government? Would that be a fair and a reasonable thing? I'll use that word again, reasonable, Mr. Mellon. Would that be fair? Would that be reasonable? Too right it would. Too right it would. If we are serious about representing people in this parliament, if we are serious about doing the right thing in this parliament, then we should support this motion. Not only should we support this motion, we should follow it up and ensure that the government does the right thing by these people. We should, we must. It's something that I felt very strongly about for a very long time. It's a, it's a sense of outrage at this injustice that has occurred. And I'm pleased that Mr. Barton said toward the end of his contribution this afternoon that he stands here prepared to rebuild and to help rebuild the industry that he loves. And I'm delighted that he said that. And I give a commitment here today, very publicly. Doesn't get much more public than this, but I give a commitment to Mr. Barton here today that I stand here willing to help you do that in any way that I possibly can. The deal that you and your fellow operators received stinks to high heaven. Stinks to high heaven. It should not be swept under the carpet. It should not be forgotten about. It should be rectified, and those people who have suffered should be given the opportunity to get back what they lost. That is so important. If you want to right a wrong, here's the opportunity to do it. And I urge every member of this House to support Mr. Barton's motion.